What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Colten Kahler Show on the Sports 2.0 Network. I'm your host, Colten Kahler. Pleased to be joined tonight by Dan Bradley. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Colten. Glad to be part of the show tonight.
Finally get underway after Tanner talked for about 45 minutes.
He's known to do that, but we love him.
Got to give him crap. We love him, but got to give him a little bump when we can. We'll start here. For those that don't know, Dan, why don't you share a little bit about yourself if you can?
Sure. My connection with the 2.0 network is I host Pod Snipe Selly Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. That's our hockey program with the Sports 2.0 network. Been writing for Noop for a little over a year now, started September of 2020. Beyond that, I work as a hockey broadcaster with Cincinnati Junior Cyclones. I've been doing play-by-play for junior hockey for 9 seasons now. Kind of bounced around, got my start in Peoria, Illinois, then went back to Minnesota, my home state. Was there for, 4 years, and then moved out, or no, more than 4 years. It was about 5 or 6, yeah, and then moved to Cincinnati to be with my fiance last September, and that's when I started here.
So you can follow Dan down here on Twitter. There is his handle there. You went to Bradley, right?
I did, yep. So I graduated from Bradley in 2014 with a degree in sports communication.
Okay, so that's where I'm at currently, living at home.
Okay.
Rocking it over at the old Bradley, having grand old time in that communication building right now.
Yep, good old GCC. Gotta love it.
So we'll start with a little bit of breaking news that we saw while we were waiting for Tanner. Who was it again that you said? I can't.
For the Colorado Avalanche out tonight?
Yeah.
Mikko Rantanen out of the lineup tonight. Left the pregame skate early. Was not on the ice for warmups, and he's been ruled out for tonight's game. So that's a big loss for the Colorado Avalanche.
We both got our hockey jerseys on. Obviously, I've got the Blues jersey on here. Big Blues fan, you can see. Obviously, Dan, big Minnesota guy.
Hockey, baby.
For a team that's hot right now, St. Louis, and a team that's really struggling in Colorado. They're 2-4 to start the season. Obviously, they're favorites to start the year with Vegas. Those are probably the two powerhouses in the Western Conference. And you start the season with Nathan McKinnon on the COVID list. You beat the Blackhawks because who's going to lose to the Blackhawks? And then you lose to St. Louis. And through 4 games that McKinnon's been back, he leads the team in points already with 1 goal, 5 assists. They're getting slow production from everyone else, and I think that's hurting them right now, and not to mention the injuries that we talked about before.
You're exactly right, Colten. Colorado is really shorthanded, and it goes beyond just having Rantanen out of the lineup tonight. Samuel Girard is out. Devon Taves is still on injured reserve. I think November 3rd is what I saw from when he'll be back, so sometime next week. But those are 2 big defensemen who play a lot of minutes for Colorado. That hurts. Valeri Nichushkin is out of the lineup tonight as well. He might be their best defensive forward on that Avalanche roster, really active forechecker and good through all zones. So coming in against a 5-0 undefeated St. Louis Blues team, that's what I'm going to be watching until my Wild start, because they've got the late game out in Seattle tonight. So that one's 10 o'clock, but we're moments away from puck drop in Blues Avs, which should be a fantastic game of hockey.
Yeah, and the Blues have their own kind of issues right now, both with O'Reilly and Saad on the COVID list. Besides that, they're really the one thing I love about this team this year is the depth that they have. They've shown that here early on, and they bring up Dakota Joshua from Springfield to fill the role there of O'Reilly. They move the lines around, but one guy that has kind of surprised me, Vladimir Tarasenko. I've got his jersey on right now, Tarasenko there, my favorite player, and he's been by far probably one of the better players on this team this year.
Definitely. Tarasenko, coming off of the shoulder surgeries that he's had and coming off of the offseason where the talk of St. Louis was, is Tarasenko going to get traded? I still don't know if that's something that is in the works. I think he's got 2 years left on his deal. What is he? Is he either $7 or $9 million? It's some odd number like that, but It's up there a ways. on his contract. So it would be a very, very difficult contract to move this year. Might get easier next year with some retained salary, but I don't know. I think Tarasenko is starting to come around on this team, and why would you want to leave a team that's undefeated right now if you're
Exactly.
Tarasenko? I mean, the Blues won the Cup 3 seasons ago, so they know that with most of this same core in place, that's a group that can get there. You've got an undefeated. You're one of the final 4 undefeated teams in hockey. You're sitting in first place in a very, very good Central Division. Top heavy, but a good Central Division. Why would you want to leave right now? Tarasenko has been a special player. He is a special player. He's a threat to score every time he's on the ice. As a Wild fan, I've hated but respected him for years now, just for the dangerous player that he is on the ice.
So let's kind of, get to, I guess, the elephant in the room with the NHL this week. Obviously, with everything coming out as the Blackhawks, and you covered it a lot in your podcast. It's a tough subject, but obviously Stan Bowman's out, president, GM, and everyone associated with that 2010 team is out. It's kind of a mess going on in Chicago right now.
It really is. And this is a thing that needed to happen. And it's happening about 10 years later than it really should have, which is just terribly, terribly sad. But it is, in the grand scheme of things, a good thing that this is happening. The information needed to be made public. Who knew what and when? The report that came out and the details of it are just heinous and grotesque. It's terrible. The types of things that went on, the harassment that Kyle Beach endured. Kyle Beach revealing himself to be the John Doe in that case. An incredibly courageous act to step forward and not only to be pursuing the case against the Blackhawks, but also to step forward and put a face behind this story as well. It takes incredible courage to do that. The reporting on it has been phenomenal. But this has been a long time coming and needed to happen. And I think it's still going to have a ripple effect throughout the league. You have Joel Quenneville, who was the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks at the time, currently coaching the first place 7-0 undefeated Florida Panthers. What are you going to do there? He was the coach at the time that this happened. He said he didn't know, and every report is saying that there's no way that Q couldn't have known that this was the case. You have Kevin Cheveldaev, who is the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets. He was the assistant GM in Chicago at the time. He's moved up his meeting. He's meeting with Gary Bettman, I believe, tomorrow to discuss his future and any sort of ramifications there. Anybody who was affiliated with that team has to meet with Gary Bettman before being allowed back into the league in any official capacity. So we're far from seeing the end of whatever happens here. We've still got a long way to go. And as earth-shattering as that news was to hear yesterday and over the past couple days, it's needed to happen. And I'm glad to see that it is happening and that hopefully we can make some progress here so that incidents like this never happen again.
Yeah, and we talked about it in one of my classes today. Just what it's going to take for some of these guys that were involved for them to get back in the league after their meeting with Gary Bettman. I don't even know if there's anything that you really can do, to really kind of, find your way back, because you're going to have to serve some sort of punishment, I would assume. And my whole thing on the Joel Quenneville is, if we're going to fire John Gruden because of what he did, in my opinion, Joel Quenneville needs to be fired.
I would agree. And I think it goes even beyond the ties to football with firing Gruden as well. I think the league needs to set a firm precedent here that this can't happen again. They fined the Blackhawks $2 million, which hefty amount, but that's an amount that the team makes back in maybe a game or two at home. That's an amount that is less than what the New Jersey Devils were fined for signing Ilya Kovalchuk to an illegal contract. They were fined $3 million for that. The league later reimbursed them for half of that fine. It's a greater fine than the Roberto Luongo cap recapture penalty. So far, the league has not taken, I think, as firm of a stance on this as they could. It's kind of tough because at the same time, they've cleared everybody out other than the Wirtz family, the owners of the team, and two of the players who are still there, Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane. I don't think you can terminate Kane and Taves' contracts and tell them that they're supposed to sit out a year or anything like that, especially as they weren't necessarily the perpetrators. We don't know if they were the agitators. There's reports in the bigger report, there are accounts of players who harassed Kyle Beach, homophobic insults thrown his way, making light of a toxic, abusive situation. We don't know what Kane and Taves' involvement was in that regard, but it is safe to say I would think that they were at least privy to some of that. So I don't know how, with everybody being gone, the league could still punish the team beyond that. But it does seem hypocritical in light of other stances that they've taken. The Arizona Coyotes losing multiple years of draft picks for illegal prospect testing is one that comes to mind. The recapture penalty and the contract penalty that I talked about a moment ago. The level of inconsistency here is, I think, the biggest frustration to the fans of, we need to know, how serious are you taking this really, and what are you doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Right. And it's the biggest thing, I think, the problem that we see in sports is the inconsistency, not only coming from teams, but from the league as a whole. And, you mentioned that the different penalties that you see fines wise, that, they were only fined $200 or $2 million. And you kind of see that. And I think that's where a lot of the issues, in retrospect, if the Blackhawks would have just taken care of this as they should have back in 2010 right away and reprimanded it, we obviously, hindsight, we wouldn't be here in this position. But it just seems too often in sports, things just kind of get swept under the rug.
I would agree. And I think that's something that it happens regardless of the league. We've seen different cheating scandals pushed under the rug. And you look at with Major League Baseball and the Houston Astros cheating scandal. Let me get out in front of this before we get too far and say that I am not equating cheating in the World Series with sexual assault, but I'm just saying in terms of a win at all costs mentality and the things that we see swept under the rug when teams are in that type of mode where it is win at all costs. And you have college football programs with improper benefits to players. You have in the MLB, you have the Astros cheating. In Chicago, you have sexual assault cover up because apparently that's something that they thought could derail the team. Now, how do you honestly sit here and say that getting rid of a video coach would have cost them the cup? I don't think it would have.
Right.
That Blackhawks team was a very, very, very good hockey team. They deserved to win the cup. And I'm not in favor of stripping them of the title. I'm not in favor of vacating their wins. Brad Aldrich's name is still on the Stanley Cup. I think it needs to be X'd out. We've seen that done before. The league doesn't completely remove names that are on the cup. However, I definitely think that his name will be X'd out in the near future. I think that's an appropriate measure to take because then the X's are there and you ask, well, what happened? And that's a way that we can continue to make sure that this is a scar on the league and this will not happen again. But we can point to that scar and say, here's what happened, here's why it happened, and here's the fallout from that.
one thing that we want to get to is our first segment, hot seat, hot take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we kind of are in the same area on this one, but I'll let you go with your first hot seat.
Okay, first hot seat that I have in mind, sticking with the Chicago Blackhawks, is head coach Jeremy Colten. Aside from all of the sexual assault fallout in the cleaning house of the organization, I would not be surprised if this is Colleton's last year coaching in Chicago. The Blackhawks are winless on the season, I believe 0-5-2.
Mm-hmm.
They choked a lead away in the third period last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was, as a Blackhawks hater, being a Wild fan.
Don't get us wrong.
It was fun to see the collapse, and my co-host on Pod Snipe Selly is Joel Fernino. He's a big Blackhawks fan. So I called him after the game to say what happened, and he said, "I'm honestly about to cry." Like, he was pissed. It was funny. I have to give him a hard time because he's the type of person who will give you a hard time as well. You know, he's a good dude, but we have to tease each other about the Blackhawks and the Wild. It was just kind of delightful to see that collapse. But I think Colleton is definitely on the hot seat. I don't think he's the only coach on the hot seat to begin the year. I do have another hot seat, but I'll let you go first with your other hot seat.
Don't get me wrong. We would both love to see just the Blackhawks, this team right here, just love to see them struggle because we both just despise the Blackhawks. So the longer Jeremy Colleton stays the head coach, the longer I'm happy because they're not going to be good with him.
Well, and it's so great with the Bears and Matt Nagy too, and how bad the coaching situation is there, that Chicago is just praying to get rid of these coaches. It's delightful.
Yeah. Well, and I share obviously the same hot seat there with Jeremy Colleton. They're just the Blackhawks. Since he was hired, the Blackhawks have not been good. I mean, it's not that they haven't been good; they haven't been relevant, and I think that's the biggest thing. Which, again, I don't mind to see because I had to suffer through cup runs after cup runs, and the Blues were just terrible. And now it's kind of flipped, so I like it a little bit. But I'll go with my hot take. I don't know if you saw this today. I don't know how much really of a hot, but it is. PETA came out today and said that they want to change the term and the name bullpen in baseball. They want to get rid of the name because of the negative connotation that it has around bulls, the animal, and how.
I haven't heard this.
So they don't want them to be confined to pens. They're supposed to be out in the wild to where they can run free. And they feel that baseball is doing a bad thing because animals have feelings. Is legitimately what PETA said today. That animals has feelings and they do not like the terminology bullpen. So PETA came up with a new name for the bullpen, and they even changed their Twitter name to it. You have any guesses what that name is?
Oh boy. It's not animal themed in any way, shape, or form, is it?
Not really, no.
Not really? Okay. Never mind. That's not safe for airways. We'll let that one go. I got nothing.
PETA came up with the arm barn.
Arm barn.
As the new term instead of the bullpen.
Arm barn.
And I'm like, is this really where we're at? Is this as a society where we have progressed to is because we feel bulls should have a say in a bullpen for a game of baseball?
This is the same organization rather that said we needed to get rid of the phrase beat a dead horse and replace it with the phrase feed a fed horse. I mean, PETA's always looking for something to be relevant. I can't imagine baseball changing the name of the bullpen. Baseball doesn't make big changes like that. It is a traditionalist sport through and through. And you have traditionalists who don't want anything about the game to change. The pace of play, don't pimp a home run. Don't come off the mound fist pumping after a strikeout, anything like that. Don't show anybody up. Baseball is so traditionalist in its ways that I can't imagine that changing the name bullpen is something that would happen. To Arm Barn of all things, like,
Yeah.
at least make it something that sounds good. Like, Arm Barn doesn't even sound good.
I hope that they don't, but you never know in this world anymore. I'll let you go ahead with your hot take.
Okay, hot take. This one is going to be a bit narrow casting because it is Minnesota Wild game night, and being a Minnesota Wild fan and being a hockey guy, that's how they know me in Peoria, is as Hockey Guy Dan.
I hear that name come across the radio station quite often.
It
At
does.
least more when Tim was on.
Yep. Yeah. Tim is a good friend of mine. Went to Bradley together, interned at the Olympics together. Good times talking with Peoria and Jim and Tim, and I'll still contribute to the show from time to time too. But had to come at it with a hockey take tonight. Minnesota Wild are, because of a couple of players who are on the COVID list, including Rem Pitlick and Matt Zuccarello. Kevin Fiala is going to be moving up to play on the first line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov. That means the best playmaker in the lineup tonight of Kaprizov and the best pure scorer in the lineup of Kevin Fiala are finally going to be on a line at the same time. And I am predicting 3-point nights for each of them tonight.
3
against the Seattle Kraken, 2-4-0, 2-5-0.
They're not off to a good start.
They just won their second game the other night against Montreal, but it hasn't been a good start. They got blown out by the Flyers. This is the type of game for Minnesota that I think they could really get one early and really let it steamroll. I'm thinking that line is really going to produce tonight. Eriksson Ek is already off to a career year, playing some of the best hockey we've seen from him. So I think big night coming up for Kaprizov, Fiala, Eriksson Ek. That whole line is really going to be fun to watch tonight.
You know, when Vegas came in the league, there was a lot of, excitement and a lot of showbiz that they kind of did with it. And that's, rightfully so, because it's Vegas. Mm-hmm. But I got to say, seeing what's coming out of Seattle and how well they're supported already, it's pretty interesting and it's pretty cool to see.
It is, and you can see why they chose Seattle as a hockey market. Being geographically close to Vancouver, they're somewhat familiar with Canucks hockey, but not necessarily to the same degree. But this is a city that has gone through the heartbreak of losing a team and having the Supersonics move to Oklahoma City and become the Thunder. The Seahawks are good, but what are you going to have until baseball comes around in April? You got to have something to fill that time, and there's no basketball and no hockey in that stretch. So I think it made a ton of sense to put a team in Seattle. I love seeing how the community has embraced the Kraken already. Their barn was electric for the opener. They had Ann Wilson of Heart come out and sing the national anthem. The place went nuts. The barn was bumping the whole night. I mean, it was fantastic. It was what you want. You would have thought that was, a Toronto Maple Leafs type of home crowd or a New York Rangers home crowd, just a raucous fan base. And it's going to be tough for the Wild to play there tonight. I mean, the Kraken's Climate Pledge Arena is so well attended already early in the season. And I hope that trend continues, even as the team is kind of struggling out of the gate a little bit here. Seattle's taken to that team, and they're going to be very, very good over the next few years, especially with the fans behind them.
I want to get to baseball real quick. We're 2 games in through the World Series. We haven't seen a really good game yet, in my opinion. Pretty well, Atlanta controlled it most of the night on Tuesday. Houston pretty well controlled it all night last night. And we go to Atlanta. Last night was the type of game I expected to see. I knew it was coming. Houston's not a type of team that's just going to let you roll over them. They're going to take that first punch, and they're going to punch right back. And the thing I love about baseball is, for as much as people have hated on Houston, for as much as people have just berated them for what they've done, they've come back and basically just kind of gave a double bird to everybody and says, we're here again. And that's the part I love about baseball is the ability to do that.
I think it goes to show that when the Astros cheated in the World Series, that they didn't need to cheat to win. I mean, they have a very good team, and we're seeing that with playoff appearances in back-to-back years after the cheating scandal broke. Lack of punishments may have had something to do with that as well when you get to have those players on the field. But Houston really set the mold for how a team, an organization as a whole, completely bottoms out, sells off all their assets, goes through the pains of a rebuild, and then rises back the right way as a contender. There's a reason that they've been one of the winningest teams in baseball over the last 5 years. It's because they really meticulously and controversially told the fans, hey, we're going to bottom out. We're going to suck. They had 3 straight 100-loss seasons. It was not fun. It was not good baseball. They could barely get people into the games. You know, they had $2 tickets throughout almost an entire season at one point. But they built into such a good contending team and making smart moves, redoing their player development system from the minors all the way up to the pros, completely changing their organization into a team that was going to be competitive for a long time. And cheating scandal aside, I think they've still set the bar for that incredibly high. Now, does the cheating tarnish their World Series win? Absolutely. Are there going to be people who question whether they cheated in some way, shape, or form in this World Series? Probably so, regardless of whether they win or lose. On paper, I think the Astros have a slightly better team. The Braves are a very, very good baseball team. That's why they got to the World Series to begin with. I could easily see this series going 7 games. But Houston really, as you touched on, it's just impressive what they've done. But I hate the fact that they cheated to get there because it just leaves a bitter taste in your mouth.
No, it does. And you look at, the injuries that they've had, after they lost Lance McCullers in the White Sox, I was like, there's no chance if they get past this series that they're doing anything. And they seemingly, handled Boston pretty well besides, the 2 games that Boston won. But it goes to show that baseball is an offensive game. I mean, even with the injuries that they've had, Houston has hit the cover off the baseball. And much of the reason why they're, in the position they are.
I think that's a change that we're starting to see around baseball too, is so much of it is power pitching and power bats. You don't have guys who are trying to, pull the ball to beat a shift or, bunting down the line to get on base. You're seeing live and die for the home runs and live and die by power pitching. And can you blow it past a guy at 105 and then drop a change up in the dirt at 82 and have it look exactly the same coming out of your hand? It's what can you do in that regard? But the Astros, it's amazing to think about the pitching that they have lost in the past few years, but they've still kept their team together and been competitive and just churned out, with Verlander and with Cole out the door, and they're still right back in the World Series because the rest of their team is that good. And they had that many good players in their system to bring up who are ready to go as well and earn that time on the mound, earn that time in the field and at the plate. They're a good team, and they're here for a reason.
Right. And as much as it pains everybody to watch because just they have that reputation now, and it's associated with them forever. And at the end of the day, it's good baseball. It is. I mean, watching them play, I was reliving, yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of the David Freese game in 2006 or 2011.
It was one of the greatest playoff baseball games in my lifetime.
It's arguably one of the greatest just baseball games in my lifetime period. Now, as a St. Louis fan, I'm not biased at all. But watching some of those highlights and how the Cardinals did everything, it's amazing how much the game has changed in 10 years.
Well, and you look at things like who all was on that Cardinals team and how that kind of set the mold as well. Having your power bats with Pujols, that was in his last season, and he was kind of he was the face of that team, but you had Yadier Molina, who was a 300 hitter that year. Just going around and looking at that team, the pitching staff, Carpenter and Wainwright, two reliable vets at that point in their careers, but not your dominant power pitching that you see today. They were much more about the control and get ground outs, get fly outs, because they weren't throwing hard. They were just throwing strikes. They were throwing pitches that were hard to hit.
Right.
But it was the control and the accuracy more so than just the raw power of what they were doing. So the game has changed so much since then.
And I hate how much the game has changed, because I'm kind of the traditionalist old man, get off my lawn in baseball. Like it's the way I was raised, and it's just the way I think. I would rather watch a good sacrifice bunt or a good, a bunt to beat the shift, because more times than not, if you put it in fair territory, you're going to get at least a double. In my opinion, you could easily get a double if you bunt it down the third base line.
Yeah, if you get that big shift and everybody shifted over the right side, why not? Let her rip.
Right. And, learning how to hit the other way, it bothers me to see the power pitching and the power hitting. And I know, for a lot of young kids and people that just want to go to the baseball game to have a good time, and they're trying to speed up the game, it bugs me, but, I could go on my soapbox all day about that. So I digress a little bit.
Baseball at its core, baseball was founded in the 1800s. We did not have television at that point. We were barely making an indent into radio at that point. People went to a baseball game and that was their whole day, because there wasn't much else to do. That was how they wanted to spend their time. Baseball was not meant to be a fast-paced game. It was meant to be a game that could take the whole day.
Right.
And to your point on how the game has changed, if Greg Maddux were a prospect today, he'd never make it past Double-A ball the way that he pitched. He was so accurate and so good, but he wasn't, a power pitcher. He wasn't, he was a decent strikeout guy, but that was more because of the control on his pitches versus being able to blow away guys with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. He might make Triple-A, but I can't imagine that he would have ever been a big leaguer if he were coming up as a prospect today. And that's such a shame to see, because he was such a dominant pitcher.
And, the way the baseball has changed as well over the years. And the MLB, they've kind of dictated it. And it bugs me, because I when I played baseball in high school, I was the Greg Maddux type. Never threw hard, but, you hit spots. You live off of bad umpires in high school. You make a living on the outside corners, and it's pretty much what Greg Maddux did. I want to get to football. We've got a little bit left here. Again, Dan Bradley joining me tonight. Appreciate it. So we're going to get to football. Let's start with in the college realm. I don't know where you have a favorite college team?
Not really. Part of that too was growing up in Minnesota. The Gophers have never been a good football team at any point in my lifetime. The last couple of years under PJ Fleck, they've started to look like they know what they're doing, but then they get a game where they're 30-point favorites against Bowling Green and lose. So, it's just ridiculous. So my college football, for me, I get to enjoy college football just purely as a fan of the game of football and looking at what teams do well. I look at the way LSU had their defense over the last few years and just how good that was. The way Alabama is able to put together a good team year after year after year. The way that any Wisconsin Badgers offensive line is going to be pound it down your throat run game, and just fantastic NFL development. Looking at teams on the rise like Cincinnati, which the buzz here around town has just been incredible with how good Cincinnati football is, and the realization that if there is a year that Cincinnati is going to make the college football playoffs, this is it. This is the best team that they're going to have for a long time. If they can get to the college football playoffs, that'll be a huge thing for recruiting. but with how many players they'll have leaving the program, it's going to be tough for them to get back there, say, next year or the year after that. So getting to enjoy football purely as a fan of the game for college is kind of where my big enjoyment of it lies. But team-wise, don't really necessarily have a favorite college team. I'll root for Minnesota because that's my home state, home team. But as far as allegiances go, kind of just find players that I like and coaches that I like and enjoy seeing them play well.
As an Illinois fan, I really don't know how to describe my college football experience. You lose to UT San Antonio, or you beat Penn State on the road as the number 5 team in the country. So you get the best of both worlds.
You get Bradley football, undefeated since 1960.
Exactly. And it's the one thing I wish Bradley had was football, but that's never going to happen. So, looking at college football, for some reason, I'm kind of like you because Illinois is out of it by about week 4 every year anyways. So I'm kind of, off to just watching games and appreciating it and watching Alabama just, be poetry in motion. Cincinnati it's going to do one of 2 things, obviously. It's going to do something really good. And if they make it and they win, it's going to open a whole lot of possibilities. We could be talking expansion of the playoffs to get more teams like that in to give them a chance because, teams like Cincinnati only come around so often. Or if they lose, it's going to shut up the entire conversation of trying to put teams like that in the playoffs because you've heard, UCF in the past, Coastal Carolina last year, Cincinnati was in that mix as well. And it's going to be basically, it's a Power 5 thing. And Cincinnati's moving conferences. I believe they're going to the Big 12, right? Or are they not moving?
I don't think they're moving yet. I know that's been in the conversation, and part of it is because of how skewed college football is towards those Power 5 conferences, and almost to the point where it's becoming a Power 4 between the Big Ten, the Pac, the SEC, and the ACC. Between those 4 and the Big 12, with Texas and Oklahoma trying to leave, what do you have left at that point for Big 12? Is it still a Power 5 conference even? College football so desperately needs to figure out, A, do conferences even still matter? Or B, do we get away with traditional conference play, as it were? You can still set your opponents and keep true to your traditions, because we still do want to see Auburn and Alabama every year. We want to see Texas and Oklahoma every year. We want to see USC and UCLA every year. Those rivalries aren't going anywhere. But strictly from a standpoint of moving toward the college football playoff and what it means for bowl games, what it means for the playoff, I think we could be heading towards a scenario where college football conferences more or less go away, or at least dramatically restructure from where they're at now, because where it is now isn't working.
Right. And you see I even think the Big Ten's a little watered down this year. Mm-hmm. I really don't think Michigan is as good as advertised. I don't know enough on Michigan State. I mean, they really don't have much of a running game, from what I've seen. I think they're...
Oh, I thought their running game was fantastic. I thought their passing game, and part of that too is I haven't watched Michigan State football as much.
For some reason, I
thought they had a very, very good running back, was what my buddy who is a Michigan State fan was telling me.
Maybe I was looking at the wrong team because I was doing some sort of prep and I could have swore I saw one of their quarterbacks has as much rushing yards as any of their running backs. That may have been a different team, and I may be kind of just having a brain fart right now. But the point's still there that I really just don't know how good they are. And it's not going to matter, in my opinion, in a year where Georgia is as good as they are, and there's still Alabama. Because I still think Alabama is the second best team in college football.
I so badly want for Cincinnati to be the second best team in the country. And are they? I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes either. I mean, they're a good team. Alabama, that loss came on the road with a field goal that curved in a way field goal kicks don't normally curve. I mean, that looked like it was going wide left, and then a sudden gust of wind just pushed it back inside the upright. That's what it looked like. I mean, that's a tough loss if you're Alabama, but it's also on the road, hostile crowd, and Texas A&M football, not a bad team, not a great team,
right?
But they're number 14 in the rankings right now. They're 6-2. Like, that's objectively a good football team that beat Alabama.
And the Texas A&M defense is pretty good. And the Alabama offensive line, I think, was missing a few players that game and had lost a few players throughout the game. So you could, watching that game, you could tell Bryce Young had no time. And it just, even for a freshman, even as a 5-star, at Alabama, it's still going to be tough to see that. I want to get to our last segment here. The Pigskin Pickem. You'll be another guest in this, so
let's go.
We'll see where you rank in the leaderboard. I believe it's still Tanner up there at the top of our Pigskin Pickem board. So my first game on the docket, we do both college, a mix of college and NFL. We're gonna go Michigan State because I think the games are actually good this week. I'm gonna take Sparty in this one just because I hate Michigan.
I don't necessarily have an allegiance to Michigan or Michigan State. I've got family members who have attended both schools. So family reunions on my dad's side can get fun at times, poking people either way about, hey, how about those Spartans? How about those Wolverines? See where that's at. And it's fun. It's nice to be able to cause that trouble knowing that I don't have the ties to either team. I do think Michigan State wins. I think they've got the better team. I think both Michigan and Michigan State, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I think they're better than Ohio State this year. Ohio State's offense is pretty good, but you look at the teams that they've played and who have they beat? They haven't beat anybody.
That is true.
Which has been the argument against Cincinnati. Who has Cincinnati beat? Well, they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame in their biggest game of the season.
They did beat Indiana.
That one.
Indiana's not great this year.
Not as good as they were, but that's still a decent football team. But Ohio State, no wins over a ranked opponent yet this year.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. And, for Ohio State, that they've won the games. Yeah, obviously you'd like to have that Oregon game back. But other than that, they've won the games on their schedule probably as they should. It's not like they've really been all too close. And the argument I have with schedule is the beginning of the year or before when you set that schedule, it's not like, you're looking down the road and seeing how much Indiana's going to struggle. You see how well Indiana played last year. And you're like, hey, this is going to be a really good game. You see Notre Dame's always going to carry that stigma with them that they're going to be good. And Notre Dame's okay this year. They're not, great by any means, but they're not terrible.
They're not a college football playoff team like they have been for the last couple of years, but still a good program, still a good team.
Right.
And still a quality win for Cincinnati to go on the road to Notre Dame and win.
Second game on the docket is arguably going to be either the quickest and most boring or the longest and most boring. Iowa at Wisconsin. I will take Iowa only because I don't, that Wisconsin offense is just so hit or miss.
It is, and Iowa's defense is very, very good. Iowa's offense has been their downfall all season, but it's still Iowa. I think Iowa is going to come out of the Big Ten West. I think whoever they go against in the Big Ten title game is going to get a run for the money. But Iowa is they're still the ones to beat in the Big Ten West for me. Don't have quite as much faith in Wisconsin as I would in years past. I think Iowa wins, and I think it's probably a lower scoring game. I think we're probably looking like a 21-17 or 17-14, 17-10, somewhere in there, just because of how good Iowa's defense is. But Wisconsin's offense has always been run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And with an inability to be effective in the passing game, I think that's what we're going to see is both teams running the ball quite a bit. Defense winning the game. Iowa's got the better defense.
Georgia at Florida. Florida's had their struggles this year. Florida's had their struggles. Georgia's really good. I don't see any way that Georgia does not win.
solely to be different because we've agreed on the first 3 picks. I'm going to take Florida. You know what? Why not? Give Cincinnati the #1 rating. Let's see Georgia lose and just embrace the chaos of college football. This season has already been so weird anyway, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 or moving towards that anyway, with how bad the Big 10 has been, with Alabama losing, before they get to the SEC title game. Let's just have some fun, make it weird, and Florida wins. It's not a solid pick 'em, but I'll take it to be different. And why not embrace the chaos of how fun it would be just to watch college football melt down if Georgia lost that game. I don't think they will, but for fun, let's say Florida.
Chaos is fun. Chaos is fun.
That's what we're here for.
Exactly. Ole Miss at Auburn. Ole Miss offense is just too good.
I think so too. Auburn, where are they at this season? They're 5-2, close in the rankings. But yeah, Ole Miss is still the pick there.
Penn State at Ohio State. Rivalry game for these two. I think there's going to be obviously a make or break game for Ohio State, but I think Penn State broke a little bit too much last week. Penn State could not figure out Illinois' 12-man or 11-man offense. Whatever.
Maybe that was it. Maybe they did have a 12th man out there. That would make it tough to figure out.
I think Ohio State wins. I like them.
I'm going to go different again here. I'm going to go Penn State. Something about Ohio State this season just feels off. It's not what we're used to seeing from Ohio State at all. Games where the offense has played well, the defense really hasn't necessarily looked as strong. Days where the defense looks good, the offense can struggle a bit with finding some rhythm, and the defense is doing some scoring on their own. I'm going to go Penn State. I feel like this is almost a trap game that maybe they're looking too far ahead to Michigan and Michigan State in coming weeks, and they kind of overlooked that this Penn State team was ranked into the top 5, just a couple weeks ago. Or maybe it wasn't quite top 5, but for sure top 10. I don't know where exactly Penn State fell in the rankings, but it's a
Penn State's
for what this year is. It's a good Penn State football team and a team that can hang with Ohio State. So let's mix it up. Let's say Penn State.
I believe Penn State had one of the largest drops I've ever seen. They went from like number 5 to like number 22.
Yeah, they were borderline unranked coming out of that loss. And it's fair. You lose to an unranked opponent at home, to have that kind of drop is fair.
Right.
I was ready to see Oklahoma fall out of the top 25 last week if they had lost to Kansas. I mean, Kansas is a bad football team. And it was bad enough that people were saying, put Spencer Rattler back in, after begging for him to get benched. Then they're begging for him to get back in there. And somehow they won it. But
yeah,
it's such a weird year in college football, and I love it.
Yes. We're going to go quickly through the NFL here. We're going to transition. San Francisco at Chicago. Chicago is just terrible. Without Khalil Mack this week, 49ers struggled on Sunday night, but I think they go into Chicago and get the win.
I think so too. Chicago's defense is good, but not great. But without Mack, that's definitely going to be trouble, getting any sort of a pass rush on whether it's Garoppolo or Trey Lance under center for San Francisco. And they may even mix in to have both playing at some point. I think Garoppolo is still supposed to be the starter this week. But the 49ers are going to try and find ways to get Trey Lance onto the field. He's maybe not quite ready to be a full-time starter, but he's such a good gadget player that there's ways that you can mix him into that offense as well. Decent running game as well for San Francisco. They're trying to get everybody healthy there. But they just have such a crop of running backs that they burn through and who can beat you. Kittle is still a threat. Brandon Ayuk has been a big disappointment this season, but I think with a favorable matchup this week, Bears secondary isn't anything to write home about. This could be a breakout week for Brandon Ayuk to kind of work his way back into the good graces. And God, my fantasy team sure hopes so that's the case. invested way too early of a pick in Brandon Ayuk this year. But that's a good football team in San Francisco playing in a tough division, and I think San Francisco beats Chicago this week.
Pittsburgh
Maybe the end of the Matt Nagy era as well. Could be.
Oh, it could be. Pittsburgh at Cleveland. If both teams could lose, that would be great. But unfortunately, that really can't happen.
Well, it could tie.
I mean, yeah, that would be great. I don't know. I haven't heard much on Baker. I would assume he's still out.
Chubb has been upgraded to questionable. Kareem Hunt is still questionable.
I'm gonna go Cleveland. I mean, they still looked really good. Granted, with Denver last week, but Denver's got a top defense. Case Keenum. I think that front line from Cleveland is still really good. So I'll take the Browns.
I'll go Pittsburgh to be different again here. I think that's probably going to be another close game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like what we saw in Baltimore last week. Sorry, had to go there. I think that will be a close game. Roethlisberger nowhere near where he used to be. Roethlisberger 2 years ago, and that Steelers team wins this game by 30. But they don't have the offense to do that right now. It'll be another close game. Is it in Pittsburgh?
No, it's at Cleveland.
Oh, at Cleveland. Shoot. Okay. I'll go this way. If Nick Chubb plays, give me Cleveland. If he's out, give me Pittsburgh. Am I allowed to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's my show, and we can do whatever we want. How about that?
There we go. I love it. That's how we'll do it. Contingent on
Nick Chubb.
And if he's able to play, if he's in, give me Cleveland. If he's out, give me Pittsburgh.
All right, we'll do that. Tampa Bay at New Orleans. This is pretty well a series that Tom Brady, besides one game, has kind of dominated. I'll take Tampa Bay.
Yep, Tampa Bay here too. Still no Michael Thomas for the Saints. That offense is, you never know what you're going to get with that offense. Alvin Kamara looks good, but the rest of the passing game hasn't quite been there this year. Getting Thomas back will help, but not really having a backup plan for when Breeze left and relying on Jameis Winston, the only quarterback in NFL history to throw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season as one of your guys, and Taysom Hill, who is a fullback who can throw. That's about where it is with Taysom Hill. He's not an NFL quarterback. He would, for what a college type quarterback would be, he would be a very, very good college quarterback. But Taysom Hill is not a starter, and they still need a long-term answer there, because I don't think Jameis is the long-term answer either.
No. Sunday Night Football, Dallas at your Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to take Dallas.
Let me tell you, by virtue of all of the hockey broadcasting that I have been doing over the past few weeks, I have been able to watch start to finish one Minnesota Vikings game this season. That is it. Because the rest of the times I've had, day games on Sunday, or I'll be on the road, be out of town, something like that. So how much Vikings football have I actually got to watch this year? This is going to be the first game since week one. Where I was visiting my future in-laws that weekend and got to sit and watch the game. So I'm very, very much looking forward to Sunday Night Football. That's going to be a fun game. Cowboys offense is one of the top, if not the top offense in the NFC right now. Vikings still dealing with some injuries, but trying to get everybody healthy. Dalvin Cook is good to go. The offensive line is good to go. Jefferson and Thielen are healthy. Conklin is going to be healthy. Excuse me. So having everybody in the mix there, it's going to come down to what Kirk Cousins do we get in prime time? Do we get the one who is historically struggled in prime time and is, I think, one win in like 10, 11 Monday Night Football games? It's not a good record. It was bad for a long time. And part of that, too, has been the teams that he was on in those situations weren't necessarily very good, or going against teams like the Seahawks. If the Vikings never played the Seahawks again on Monday night, I would be so happy. That would just make my day, because we always lose when we play the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. It doesn't matter, because it's in Seattle, it's rainy, and the Vikings lose. It's a terrible game. That's how it always ends up going. But the Cowboys, if the Vikings can stop the run, they can stop the Cowboys. The rushing attack with Zeke and with Tony Pollard, that is a good rushing attack. A great offensive line in Dallas who is able to open up those holes. They can get protection for Dak Prescott, let the receivers get open down the field. Patrick Peterson still banged up. That is something to keep an eye on as well. But I can't pick against my Vikings. I got to go Vikings here. I mean, you don't pick against your team. That's how it goes. And are the Vikings going 17-0? No. But am I picking them every week? Absolutely. And will I wear it if they're wrong? Sure. Am I going to be happy when they win? You better believe it. So Vikings, let's say Vikes by, it's not going to be more than 7. Vikes by even 4 still feels too much. I'm going to say Vikes by 3.
By a field goal.
And it's not going to be because of a field goal that they made either. It's going to be some sort of weird scenario where the Cowboys have kicked so many field goals that they're close, or it'll be a scenario where, there's a safety, something like that. The Vikes always find a way to do something weird in these primetime games. So maybe that's it. Maybe the Cowboys get a safety and that turns it into a 3-point margin. But Vikings win. Skol Vikes, that's my pick.
Monday Night Football, New York Giants at Kansas City. This is going to be some sort of matchup, but as our good friend Tanner says, scared money doesn't make money. So I'm gonna go with the Giants because I just feel right now this Chiefs team is just struggling.
They are, but this is also the type of game where that Chiefs team can get right back on track. Giants dealing with a bunch of injuries. Kadarius Toney may not be able to play. Saquon Barkley, where's his health going to be at? The Giants are just so banged up, and that team, even when they're healthy, is not a great football team. They're a middle of the road team when they're healthy. I think this is the type of game where the Chiefs, really hit the switch. I think we get a 4-touchdown, no pick, 300-yard game out of Mahomes this week. You maybe get Edwards-Helaire to break off for 100. Maybe a defensive score as well. I think this is going to be a blowout for Kansas City in this one. Just looking at the injuries and what Kansas City needs, this is the type of game that if they are truly going to be a playoff contender this season and a Super Bowl contender at that, this is the type of game where they need to absolutely blow the Giants out of the water. I think they do that. I think they get it done. Give me the Chiefs and give me the Chiefs by a lot.
Tonight's game already going underway. Arizona's up 7-0 late in the first. I said this is the game where Aaron Rodgers is going to have nothing and he's going to come out and throw 6 touchdown passes somehow and just prove to all of us it's just what he does. But I do like Arizona. I did like Arizona before the game started, so I'm going to stay with that pick just because, they're an unbelievable team this year.
They are. Even with, DeAndre Hopkins was questionable coming into tonight's game. I think he's in the lineup, right?
Yeah.
Let's check on that. But either way, Kyler Murray, solid quarterback. You've got a good Arizona defense. I think they're the number 1 fantasy defense right now. In a tough division too. You look at who else is out there with San Francisco, not quite as much, but Seattle, good when Russell Wilson has been on the field. Rams, that is a team that looks like they could go to the Super Bowl this year. And the Cardinals are hanging serve. And not just because I'm a Vikings fan, but because the Cardinals are that good. Give me the Cardinals to win tonight.
So Hopkins is playing, so there's a big plus for them. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be interesting. It's already 7-0. As I mentioned, that game's going on right now. I would assume on Fox. But that is the end of the Pigskin Pickem, and that will do it for us here tonight on the Colten Kahler Show. Dan, I appreciate you coming on. All your insight is great. We're definitely got to have you back on more time to talk hockey because it's the hot, it's hockey season.
I just checked 1-1 Blues. You didn't miss much. They're in the intermission, so go get some food, go grab a drink, do whatever you got to do, and gear up for the rest of that one.
Beautiful. I appreciate it. But for Dan, for Colten, this has been the Colten Kahler Show, and we'll see you next week on the Sports 2.0 podcast here.